to our daily broadcast on Kabbalah for Heretics. And this morning we continue what we've been doing for 25 years every weekday morning, and that is we're studying the Zohar volume by volume, cover to cover, page by page, and sentence by sentence. And we are doing it that way, finishing up volume 4. We've already finished completely volumes 1, 2, and 3, and now we are finishing volume 4. The Zohar has been talking about these levels of soul. The lowest level being nefesh, then above that is ruach, and above that is neshama, and above that is the highest level of soul, of course, yechida. Now, it also has been interchangeably using those levels as levels of men. Those with the soul of the least evolved, nefesh, and so forth. And it says, as for the higher grade of those who are suspended in the air, when the soul, nefesh, of man seeks to prepare itself for the reception of the spirit ruach, something issues from it and seeks to rise, and in so doing meets those spirits which tell it things that will happen both in the near and the more distant future in dreams. And it cleaves to that grade until it acquires its own spirit. Now, it's talking about dreams, and as we were saying, I think, as clearly as we can, this is referencing the archetypes. Granted, they are called spirits here, but it's what Jung is talking about when he talks about archetypes. It's the same thing. So all of us are going through nightly, one way or the other, what the Zohar is describing here. That's important that we understand about the Zohar. This is not just, the Zohar isn't just giving us ancient history. It's telling us of processes and unconscious scenarios and events which are taking place now as well as 1,000, 2,000 years ago, that each of us can and does become connected to primarily in dreams. Because in dreams, there is a suspension, at least something of a suspension of the ego and of the waking world, so that that unconscious world of the collective unconscious can come up into the consciousness of the ego. Let me mention something here that I haven't yet, but really we should, and that is the levels of sleep. This is much discussed in the Vedas and much discussed in Hinduism. But let's discuss it here because it's a model for everyone's sleep patterns. There is the first stage. We lay down in bed and we are awake. The second stage is we fall into sleep with dreams, so-called REM sleep. But there is a level deeper than that, and that is dreamless sleep. We know that there is that level. We know it. All the research that was done on sleep and so forth shows that there is a level of dreamless sleep. And then, of course, we come back up out of that. We come out of dreamless sleep back into sleep with dreams, where the events and the incidents that were presented to us in our dreamless sleep are made known in the sleep with dreams. The soul recounts to us in our dreams what it experienced in that period of dreamless sleep. And then we come back up out of that into wakefulness. Now listen, the significance of that dreamless sleep is unimaginable. We just kind of brush it off and think little of it, but it's incredibly important. Just incredibly important. And if you'll shut up and listen to me, you'll see why. In dreamless sleep, when literally there is no dreaming going on, the ego is gone. The ego has, in a sense, died. We are in a state of pure, undifferentiated consciousness of nothing. It's consciousness only of itself. Chew on that a bit. Yes, in sleep with dreams, we have dreams. We see things, hear things, and so forth. But in the level below that, dreamless sleep, and we know for a fact that that is a level of sleep where there are no dreams, there is nothing. There's not you anymore. There is not them. There is not this or that. There is only consciousness of itself. That is God. That is the level of consciousness that the newborn child, that the soon-to-be born child is in at the moment it is fully developed, but not yet born. There is nothing for it to be aware of, not even itself, because to be aware of oneself, there has to be another outside of oneself. There has to be a thou for there to be an I. So in the womb, we are most in that God space that we are in every night when we enter into dreamless sleep again. Dreamless sleep is an entry into God. Not God with a beard, not God with a shovel or a spoon, but the undifferentiated, pure God consciousness aware only of itself. Nothing else. Nothing. Ein Sof, as it's called in Kabbalah. Dreamless sleep brings us into a state of Ein Sof, which is, in Kabbalah, the highest form of God. Odorless, colorless, tasteless, formless, dimensionless. Think of it. Think of it. That goal that so many spiritual people have of reuniting with God, in fact, is right there taking place every night to one degree or another. If it's a very ego-driven sleep, you have more dreams than you do dreamless sleep. But that's what it is if one sinks into it. It's Ein Sof, the highest aspect of God. And there's mind in there. Yeah, there's no body, no nose, no cheek, no hands, no activity. But there is mind. There's thought. Thought is odorless, colorless, tasteless, and formless. There is intention in that Ein Sof. By the way, it's called Sushupti in Hinduism. That space of being in dreamless sleep where there is no thing, nothing, not even you. The soul is there, but you, the ego, are not there. That's called Sushupti in Hinduism and Ein Sof in Kabbalah. But the soul is there. And when one wakes up or starts to wake up and comes up out of that sleep into dream-filled sleep, the soul reports to the ego what took place in that level of dreamless sleep that it was part of. But the ego didn't know it because the ego wasn't there. Am I being clear? This is so important. It's so important for people who say they're so spiritual and want to be spiritual and want to know God. Stop searching for God. It's right there. You don't have to go looking for it. Just go to sleep and go to sleep. And pay attention to your dreams. Write them down as soon as you have them. Because what they are is the soul reporting what took place within dreamless sleep, supernally, which you did not witness because you weren't there, you were gone, reporting that to the ego awakened in the language of God, in the language of dreams, which is symbols. Dreams are not to be taken literally unless there's something in the dream that instructs us to take it literally. The dream is metaphorically, symbolically. You dream about your next door neighbor, you're not dreaming about, that's not your next door neighbor in the dream. That's something your next door neighbor is symbolizing. That's an archetype in there that takes on the form of your next door neighbor, because in doing that, it conveys meaning to you. It conveys some meaning of itself in that it is comparing itself to your next door neighbor. But it's not your next door neighbor. It's an archetype of the collective unconscious right in there talking to you, just as it says here in the Zohar that they do. Now, another way of touching onto those dreamless spaces is while one is awake. And that takes training, and it takes practice, and it takes a spiritually arrived master who has also done it to guide you through how to do it. And when finally, and it seems to me in my own experience, with old age, it comes automatically. It's just incredible. And that is a stage of consciousness where you are awake, but also asleep. You have one foot in sleep and one foot in wakefulness, so that the contents of the collective unconscious are available, coming to you through the foot that's in the collective unconscious, and you're able to understand them at the moment by the foot that's in consciousness. Am I being clear? Raise your hand if I'm being clear. It's a very important place to achieve. And really, it isn't that hard to achieve it. You just shut up, and if you must, meditate on a single thing. And that's going to bring you into this odd feeling experience where you're dreaming and you know you're dreaming, you see? Where you're dreaming, but the ego is also present to know that you're dreaming. And that makes the experience even more immediate. But again, that takes practice, because what the individual is most prone to doing when they start this is to really experience it through the ego. The ego says, now you're doing it, now you're doing it. It's not. It's the ego saying you're doing it. Do you understand? You have to get past the ego. I remember a friend of mine who very much neuroscience and the neurology of consciousness and that kind of thing, very well educated in it. He's constantly talking about knowing the source of everything inside. I said, well, why don't you just ask it? Oh, the brain. He was saying he's really struggling to understand the brain. And I said to him, well, why don't you just talk to the brain and listen to what it says? Now, this is a form of meditation I've been teaching for over 40 years that some of you are aware of, and others of you are just going, what? What I'm suggesting, what I've often suggested and still suggest, and I still do it, is you close your eyes and you focus your total attention on your brain. Not a picture of the brain somewhere, not somebody else's brain, but literally you bring your total attention into your skull and your brain, and you see it in the mind's eye. Remember the mind's eye? The imagining, where you bring something into reality by imagining it? Well, you do that with the brain. And then you talk to it. Oh, the brain can't talk. What? How can you be so stupid? Everything we do is done by the brain until we want to really look at it. Oh, yes, everything comes to the brain. But the brain can't talk. Of course it can. It's making it possible for me to talk to you right now, and also for you to listen. So you can talk to it if you get in touch with it. And you can get in touch with it in the way I was just describing. That is through the gateway of imagining. And then you talk with it. And you listen to its answers. Because it's going to answer. Now, it's going to answer in words that will come up in you. But they're not your words. They're its words. If you've done it properly, and you've come into that space of Ein Sof, of no thing, where you have given life to the brain by visualizing it and bringing it into life in the mind's eye, in the gateway of imagining, and you talk to it and listen for it to answer, you'll hear it. You'll hear it. It will be a voice in your head. You'll hear it. You know, the thing that most people consider insane. James once said to me, James Kirsch, he said, if anybody walked by and heard us talking about the kinds of things I'm talking with you now, he said, they would be certain we're crazy. He said, and in a certain way we are. Anyway, I very carefully taught this to this friend of mine, and a few days later, driving in the car, he said, oh, by the way, I did that thing you said to do. I said, oh, I'm glad. He said, you want to know what happened? I said, well, sure. So he said, I said to it, are you the brain? And it said to me, I am your higher self. I am everything that makes you function. It is I, the brain, master of all things within you. I am he who makes you intelligent because you are. I am he who makes you persevering because you are. Be persevering as you are. And he stopped and he said, well, what do you hear? I said, I hear ego. I don't hear the brain. I hear ego. And he was, I'm telling you, I might just as well have told him that I slept with his wife last night. He was so infuriated, thus, of course, proving what I said. Because that's what typically happens to one when one first begins this kind of process that I'm describing to you. How many of you are following what I'm saying about this guy? He said, you're saying that I didn't do it right. You're saying I didn't do it the way you did it. I said, well, in a sense I am. You asked me about something that I do. I told you how I do it and the results I get from it that I can see or not see in another person. I don't see the result in you that I know should happen if you did it the way I described it. Oh, no, in his mind, you're so fucking egotistical, you know everything. I said, no, I don't know everything. I, that's the ego. That's the enemy. It says in the Zohar, when the soul of a man seeks to prepare itself for the reception of the spirit, the Ruach, something issues from it and seeks to rise in dreams, of course, and others, and in so doing meets those spirits which tell it things that will happen both in the near and more distant future. And it cleaves to that grade until it acquires the spirit. When it has done so, the spirit issues forth and cleaves its way through rocks and mountains until it ascends among the holy angels. It frees itself from the rocks and mountains of the ego. The spirit does. It frees itself. It goes beyond from and goes beyond the ego. When it does that, it is endowed with the super soul neshama. When he acquires that super soul, it ascends among the tzaddikim who are bound up in the bundle of the living. Listen, the bundle of the living, that's the brain. In the Sefer Bahir, one of the truly great and most ancient works of oral Torah and Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, it says, the entire body functions for the sake of the brain. And the Holy Spirit, like a small bird, flutters above the brain like a mother bird above its nest. When I quote the same thing to the same guy later at a different time, he said, that couldn't be possible. Nobody knew about the brain at that time. I said, that's the point, you dummy. They did. When he acquires that super soul, it ascends among the tzaddikim who are bound up in the bundle of the living, the brain. And there it sees the delight of the king and regales itself with the supernal plunder. Now, listen, the chakras, the highest chakra, the crown chakra, which is also, by the way, the crown sephira. That is where the experience of God takes place in Hinduism. When one enters the brain, when one has sucked the spirit up through the spinal column, back into the brain, that's the moment of extreme enlightenment. It cleaves its way through rocks and mountains until it ascends among the holy angels, and there it learns many things before returning to its place. Having achieved that level, we come back down. Now, not everybody does. Some people just go up there and stay there. In other words, die. It's dangerous stuff. This is as far as man can attain in holiness until he is endowed with a super soul, the neshama. And when he acquires that super soul, it ascends among the righteous who are bound up in the bundle of the living. And there it sees the delight of the king, regales itself with the supernal splendor. And when the holy Shekhinah awakens with the north wind, the soul comes down, and that righteous one who has acquired it arises and strengthens himself like a lion in the study of the Torah until morning. We'll talk more about that tomorrow morning. Let me mark my place. Now, that will conclude the broadcast for this morning. I'll end the program as I have ended it every program, and will continue ending it every program for the next year by reciting the Holy Kaddish, the sacred Kaddish, the prayer for the dead in honor of the soul of our departed beloved friend, fellow Kohen and Tzaddik, Leonard Cohen. By the way, let me mention something. The necessity for reciting the Kaddish for the soul of the departed at the grave every morning for a year until the 1 year anniversary of his death is not just to memorialize him. It is to aid in lifting that soul up, up, up through the process just described in the Zohar. So by reciting the Kaddish every morning, the person who has pledged to do that is aiding in the lifting up of the soul out of its bodily, worldly form up to Yechida, up to the highest level. That's why I do it every morning and will continue doing it every morning on behalf of my beloved departed friend Leonard Cohen. Not just to memorialize him, not just to honor him, but to help him in the way he helped me through my life. I got your back, bro. Yiskadal v'yisdash. Shmei Rabbo. Bo mo divro chirusei v'yamlech machasei. V'chayachon av yom echon av chayed chol beis Yisrael. Bagalo uvizman kori vimro amen. Yehei shmei Rabbo meverach le'elam amel maya. Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yisparav v'yisamam. V'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yisalei v'yisalal. Shmei dekudsho b'richu. Le'elam mincha v'yirchasa v'shirasa teshvechasa. V'dechemasa damechon v'mo vimro amen. Yehei shlomo Rabbo min Shemaya. V'chayinu eleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom v'imramov. Hu ya'asei shalom. Oleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'imru amen. Go in peace. The broadcast is ended. Shalom.